Well, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Rex Facer. I'm the chair of the Independent Redistricting Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to our public hearing here in Provo. We appreciate you coming out. We hopefully will have one more commissioner join us. Understand he's in the middle of the commute, so hopefully the traffic will be kind to him. And we have two other commissioners who may not be able to join us tonight, but we're grateful for the set of commissioners that we do have. And we have on our agenda, we have an action item to approve the minutes from September 4th, 17th, 18th, and 21st. Does anybody have any changes or corrections that they'd like to recommend to the minutes? Not hearing any. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move we approve of.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. What I'd like to do at this point is describe a little bit about the process that the Independent Redistricting Commission is involved in, as well as note how we're related, I guess is maybe the best way, to the work of the Legislative Redistricting Committee. So in 2018, the voters approved Proposition 4, which created the Independent Redistricting Commission. There was then some modifications made with a compromise with better boundaries in the legislature that refined the process through Senate Bill 200 in 2020. As a result, we have a 7-member commission with 3 of the members being appointed by the legislative leadership in the Republican leadership in the legislature, and 3 by the Democratic leadership in the legislature. And then the chair was appointed by Governor Cox. The charge that we were given was to produce district maps for Congress, the State House, the State Senate, and the State School Board. And our goal is to provide maps that will be useful to the legislature. At the end of the day, the legislature will receive the set of maps that we'll prepare, and they will then make an ultimate decision on the redistricting maps for the state. The commission started its work in February. We spent our first few months getting organized and starting to learn about redistricting. And that process then took us through the early months of summer. And then on the 12th of August, we had probably the most important day to the commission. That's when we received access to the census data that would allow us to do our redistricting work. Normally, the census produces data and it's available usually in about April of the year following the census. This year, because of the pandemic, among other things, the data was delayed and we didn't get it till August. And then it took a little while for it to get into our software so we could start mapping with it. But by late August, we were able to start drawing maps. And we created a set of map drawing teams so that with the 7-member commission, we have 3 map drawing teams. 2 of the teams have 2 members and 1 team has 3 members. Each of the teams has somebody that was appointed by a Democrat and somebody that was appointed by a Republican. And so our goal in this entire process has been to be a cooperative commission. And it's one of the things that we're, I think, really proud of is our ability to work together regardless of who appointed an individual member of the commission. So through the end of August or October, we will be continuing to draw and refine our maps. We're starting the process of winnowing down the set of maps that we have, but we will continue to revise those maps based on the public comments that we hear through the process of the remainder of our public hearing. We still have several additional public hearings. For example, tomorrow we'll be out in Eagle Mountain and then up in Tooele. The following week we'll be in Moab. then Layton, and then Logan. And then the week after that, we'll be in Harriman and West Valley City. So we've still got a number of public hearings ahead of us. And we look forward to the input that we'll be receiving so that we can refine the maps as we start to narrow them down to make sure we have maps that represent the interests of the citizenry. On November 1st, we will submit our maps to the legislature. That's our deadline. And they then will have the responsibility to review those maps and make a final decision on what maps that will be approved by the entire legislature. We have a set of criteria that drive our map drawing. The first of those criteria is that each district needs to be of equal population. And for the congressional districts, that means that each district has to have approximately 817,904 people. Now, there is the ability to have some deviation, although the preference is for smaller rather than larger deviations. We have on our website the precise deviation amounts that are allowed by the decision that we made as a commission, as well as the decision of the Legislative Redistricting Commission or Committee in terms of the deviations. So the state Senate, each seat needs to have about 112,814 people. House seats, 43,622. And the state school board, about 218,000. Now, one of the things that you'll quickly note is in a city like Provo or Orem, where you've got over 100,000 people, you're going to have multiple House districts, and potentially you'll have Senate districts that will overlap communities. And so with that, the challenge that we have is to pay attention to our other criteria. So one of those criteria is that the areas have to be contiguous, so they have to be touching each other. So we can't have, say, that to get 112,000 people in Orem, we can't say, well, we'll take that and then we'll jump over Provo and take a little bit out of Springfield. No, it has to come in a city contiguous to Orem. So it could be a place like Vineyard, could be a place like Linden, or a place like Provo. And so those are the kinds of issues that we're looking at for contiguity. The statute requires us to look at compactness. And compactness in the urban areas of the state is reasonably straightforward because we have a lot of people in a relatively compact area. But when it comes to the rural areas of the state, where people are geographically spread out significantly, those districts will be much less compact to get even the House districts of 43,000 people. Now, when you've got a county like Daggett that only has just under 1,000 people, you've got to start combining them with several other counties in many cases in order to reach the correct population levels. One of the other criteria that we've been asked to look at that is relatively new in the process of redistricting is the notion of communities of interest. And so one of the things that we have done as a commission is we've asked people to tell us what their communities are. And so we have processed about 1,000 community of interest maps that the public has drawn for us. And those are available on our website. And we can now overlay those onto our map drawing so we can see where it is that people are telling us about their communities. That could be an economic community. It could be a community of some other interest, such as cultural interest. It could be a theater community. It's whatever community people define. And we have then categorized them into about 9 different categories so that we can look at and compare things such as religious communities versus neighborhoods versus economic communities, among other categories. In addition to communities of interest, which in many ways, it was one of the kind of greatest unknowns, and it's difficult because not everybody defines a community the same. We then have other criteria that are a little more easy to understand, such as paying attention to geographic boundaries, things like rivers, man-made structures such as I-15, and where we can use geographic features, whether it's a river or a freeway, that we should consider using that as a boundary for a district. We've also been tasked with looking at the cores of prior districts. And that's one of the things that we've just had some work done by our staff to help us identify cores of prior districts and give us some metrics to help us think about that criteria. And then we've been asked to look at municipals and counties and to try and minimize the splits of those entities. But you'll note, as I mentioned earlier, in a place like Provo, where you're going to have at least 3 House districts, so you're going to have some splits in some communities. And the challenge is that because those splits don't always happen in even increments of the size of a district, they then spill over into other communities. And so it's kind of like squeezing a balloon in some ways. When you squeeze it and you get the right amount in your hand, all of a sudden it's ballooned out to the other side, and you've got to then move down to try and capture additional population in a place where you may not have originally intended to do that. We then have been asked to look at boundary agreement. And this is, in some ways, I think this is probably the most difficult criteria because we have 29 Senate districts, 75 House districts, 15 school board seats, 4 congressional seats, and those don't all divide into each other in nice, even ways, so that it's not straightforward to just overlay the boundaries of House districts onto Senate districts, for example. But where we can, we've been asked to try and do that. And so, again, we welcome Commissioner Baker with us. He's our GIS expert on the commission, and he's been helping us try and think about things like keeping boundaries and these borders consistent in part because it makes the mapping process for those that will come after us a more straightforward process, among other things. The last criteria that we have is that we are not to engage in any purposeful or undue favoring or disfavoring of incumbent elected officials, candidates or prospective candidates, or political parties. And so as a result, this commission has chosen to not use any political data in the analytics that we're doing to help us in our map drawing process. And so one of the things that we're really kind of excited about, because it's fairly innovative, is the level of transparency that we've been engaged in. So if you want, you can watch us on YouTube during our map drawing sessions, and you'll see the conversations that we have with each other during that map drawing. And one of the things that you'll note is that we won't have political data in front of us. And we think that allows us to focus on the other criteria and use those as the driving criteria for our commission. So that gives you a sense of kind of the set of criteria we have, the process that we've been going through in drawing maps. But I'm sure some of my colleagues may have a thing or two that they'd like to add, or not. Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Yeah. I want to make sure that you have full opportunity to do that. So what I'd like to do now is ask Bo Bayless, one of our interns, and terrific staff, who's, among other things, learned to operate GIS systems in a way that he never imagined he would be doing. So we'll ask Bo to tell us a little bit about the process of public engagement.
So the main thing I just want to show you a little bit is this is our website. It's just UIRC.Utah.Gov. And we have a variety of ways that the public can participate. On our participate tab, we have there's 2 tabs. You can map the community interface, which Chair Facer talked about. That's really just a small area and just kind of telling us where to get together. So we have a lot of those, and then they're also, it's kind of hard to see with the light, but there's a button that says map the whole state of Utah. That it allows you to use the same software the commissioners are using to draw a map for any given district type. I know we've learned 2 people here who, as members of the public, have already worked on some of that. But I would say right now, maybe the most, I would say maybe the most important way you can help contribute comments right now is we have all our draft maps on the home page. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see these 4 options. If you click one of the buildings, it'll pull that up. And these are all of our drafted maps. So the commissioners have come up with various drafts, especially for the congressional maps. There's a variety of schools of thought that you could use, and they don't take as long to make as a house map. So we have lots of options there. And what we're really looking for is the commissioners are working to kind of decide on the last couple. That's something that we're going to, I think we're working on that tomorrow as well. But on these, we have this little form right here on the page, and you can give us a comment. And I would say that may be the most helpful feedback we can get right now is which maps do you like, which maps do you not like. And then once we decide kind of which options we're going to kind of move forward with and finish refining, telling us how to refine those will be incredibly helpful. Also on our website, we have a link we have it right about where you can just fill out a text form. You don't have to draw us any shapes if you don't want it. You can just give us a little email, give us, just a sentence or 2, or ideally more than a sentence or 2. The short responses tend to be very similar to one another. And that's really the bulk of what we have and the ways we're looking for feedback. I will say the more feedback, the better. If you send us 1 email or if you send us 10 emails, we will say thank you 10 times in a row, and we will mean it. The commissioners, as much as they know, we can't know every neighborhood in every city in the whole state of Utah. And so whatever feedback you can give us is very helpful. But unless Joey or Commissioner says I forgot, yes, please.
Is there a way to know which of the drafted maps that you previously commented on? Because I know you're posting revised maps occasionally as well.
I don't know if we have a system in place for that yet, but I can certainly make sure. And as we kind of post the updated revisions, we'll be sure to place some sort of version notator so you know that this used to be map 2 and now it's 2-2, so something is then applied to it. But I can make sure that's something we kind of make clear. Anyone else? Any questions? Did I forget anything? All right, that's the website. And if you have any questions, we'll have some staff hang out afterwards. So if you want to look at software or if you want to give us comments now, we'll be around for a little bit after we're done.
And I really want to emphasize one of the points that Bo made, and that is that on the draft maps that we have, and these are drafts that are designed to help us foster a productive dialogue. It is very helpful if you tell us precisely what it is that you like or don't like about it. There's something that we can clearly interpret if you tell us this is the worst map I've ever seen, but tell us why it's the worst map that you've ever seen. Is it because we got your neighborhood wrong? Is it because we grouped warring schools together, or whatever it was? Help us know so that we can go in and then try and respond to those. One of the things that my colleagues are doing each week after we hold these public hearings, we come back and start mapping again. And one of the first questions that we often give each other is, okay, how do we try and take what we heard and implement it in the maps that we have? So that these maps are constantly undergoing revision process in regard to the comments that we're hearing. So with that, Gordon, if you'd give us a little bit of guidance.
So what we'll do is when we start we anticipate giving you about 5 minutes to get your comments to the commission. And again, afterwards, you can stay around. We'll have an open house. We'll have our team with computers take you through the software, look at the map, and answer any questions you have.
So with that, we're going to be relatively informal, but we ask that you come up, share with us your name and then your public comment. And we're going to assume that we can be kind of orderly and not get into any kind of argument over who wants to go first, because we're going to hear all of you. And so we welcome whoever would like to go first.
Hi, my name is Daniel Friend. Facer commissioners, and I'm very grateful to be here and talking with you guys in person. I submitted both a congressional map and a state house map to the commission. At the Taylorsville meeting, I was privileged to present them over Zoom. There was a problem with my state house map and that the deviations were not correct, and somehow I was able to submit it anyway. I have since fixed that, and I'm not sure if that's something that you guys will be able to pull up. It should be a revised friendly Utah House proposal. And while that's going on, I'd like to talk a little bit more about Provo neighborhoods, which I'm sure that Chairman Casey knows a little bit about.
Couple of visual aids for the revised.
On the page previous to this, I made these packets for a previous presentation. You can see with the red lines how the Provo neighborhoods are divided among different Utah House districts. It will be on the back page of the way that I opened it there. And you can see that several of them are divided in very strange ways, with only a few blocks going on one side of the line or another. Or 10th neighborhood, which is only 9 blocks total, is divided in half. There's other places where the line jogs south or jogs north, and I can tell you that as a candidate for the Utah House in 2018, I walked those borders specifically to see if there was a reason why those blocks were carved out. I could find nothing visible as to why those blocks were in one district versus another. The only thing that I can come up with, having done the mapping process, is that that was the little block that gave me exactly the right number if you're going for a really tight deviation. But the beautiful thing with the Esri software is that we can know that we can keep neighborhoods whole or mostly whole and have house districts that do conform to the deviations. On the first page that I handed you, I have blue my proposed Utah House boundaries for Provo with an addition for how I had to revise them to make exactly the deviations work. And just adding in the one neighborhood of Edgemont, a one district go from not fulfilling the requirements to fulfilling the requirements. This, of course, caused cascading up through Utah County and into all the way up to Mill Creek to get all the populations right. But I think that it resulted in a better map, not only for Provo, but also for Orem, for Linden, and for American Fork as well. Because of these changes, we now, in my proposed map, which you all have access to, there's now a district in Orem that is entirely between I-15 and State Street with the northern border at 1200 North. That's one house district. Linden just pulls a little bit from Orem and a bit more from Pleasant Grove to make one house district. Vineyard has been combined with Western Orem, west of I-15, and Western Provo, west of I-15, with 3 whole neighborhoods just to the east of I-15 to make a single district. And that whole area is growing very, very fast. It's all a lot like Vineyard. It's all very suburban, lots of single family homes. It shares a character all the way up there Utah Lakeshore. It's, I think, quite a good district. And of course, the one that I live in is a central Provo district that is between I-15, which, by the way, in Provo, I-15 is like an artificial mountain bridge. You can't see through it, you can't go over it. It is as big a barrier as you can have between the areas. And just by crossing under the underpass, you know that there's a very different feel in the neighborhoods from one side to the other. On the eastern side of I-15, you've got density, you've got old homes. On the western side, it's all brand new. And by maintaining neighborhoods together, we have a district that is between I-15 and 9th East / State Street and south of BYU campus, all within the city of Provo. It's a central Provo district that is dense, that is easily walkable, that has great public transit, that is a unique character in Provo that should not be broken up, but currently is. And these are the kinds of communities. It's not just, the neighborhoods are building blocks. When you find neighborhoods that are similar and contiguous and put them together, you can have a true super community. And that's the principle that I've tried to follow with my maps, especially in Provo where I know it best, but everywhere that I can in the whole state of Utah, from Utah has. I'm not sure if that's going to be able to get.
Yes, okay, and I can get with you after, I don't have any new maps.
I submitted it a little while ago, but if there's a problem, we can talk about that afterwards. I did submit to you guys, and I want to make sure that you have this available to you. I'm very pleased with how my map turned out, from using the Bear River as a boundary in Cache Valley, all the way down to having districts that are pure St. George in the bottom of the state. May I answer any questions?
Questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, and we really appreciate it. And just, I have seen the friendly revision, so I know it's up there somewhere. So we'll find it, and Joy will get with you to make sure that we do have it. So
Thank you so much.
yeah.
My name is Martha Windsor, and I just have a couple of short questions. Am I correct in assuming that you're using the most recent census data?
Yes.
Okay. And also, are you going to be able to allow for move-ins, because there's so many people moving into the state, and I'm just not sure how you could accomplish that.
Yeah, we are not able to do that. The law does not allow us to deviate from the census as it was taken.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I also would like to concur with the previous speaker. Having lived in Provo for several years, the neighborhoods that are established in the Provo area are really quite important, and they work well together, and that's really an important part of Provo. Having served as a neighborhood representative, I can speak to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we do have a few online comments.
Okay, we'll get to those, but thank you.
Good evening. I'm the senior door of the city engineer, city engineer. Actually, my office is Cash, is works in the planning department. Thank you again for inviting us to be involved in the districting. Our city council members are not able to schedule conference. We're asked to attend and convey a message of thanks, and also a message of support from our city council members. Just a brief statement. I just wanted to say that myself specifically, I came from Florida. Actually, it's fastest growing state of Florida, state of Florida. Population currently about increased 5%. Currently about 65 to 70,000 residents that really understand the pains of growth. And I moved here to Vineyard, with one of the fastest cities in the United States, with astonishing about 10,000% growth in a few short years. And myself, being a city engineer, can attest to the zero indication of the slowdown of growth. Just recently, this morning, I sat down with the developer, had sat down with other developers. We're going to see turning on communities of about 300 to 400 rooftops in the very near future, as they indicate to us. Also, that the city of Vineyard has on the table several public projects, to include the UNOS Vineyard Connector, which we're very happy to be partnering on, as well as the front burner station, which again, fast moving train that'll be bringing a lot more transportation options. As an engineer, I really appreciate that. The transportation options to Vineyard, which supports the growth. And we've recently also turned on the waterfront project to serve our residents. On that, the downtown area in the city, in our city, as Vineyard does not have downtown, it soon will have a new downtown, but still downtown, so in the cities, we have a projection of about up to 40,000 residents in that area by itself. The recent census shows we moved a population of 12,543 residents, and which we believe does not accurately represent the actual population. Greenwood itself currently has about 5,111 units and about 2,500 of that in multi-family. And of course, adding the number of ADUs within the city. We want to make sure that I just want to make sure that this area has the support of this districts, and that we're representing their voice. So any kind of breakup and representation for the city of Greenwood, we feel would be really recognized for the really creative bring services, important services, important projects, and important representation to those residents.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We welcome others to comment. And while we wait for people to gather enough courage to come, we do have a couple of comments online.
Yeah, we'll start with Josh. Josh, you should be able to talk now.
Or not.
Okay, we'll start with Ron.
Okay.
Okay.
My name's Rodney Hurd. I'm coming to you from Richfield, Utah, down in Sevier County. I'm a high school teacher at North Sevier High School, and I'm also a member of the board for the Utah Education Association. I represent teachers from 11 school districts and about 1,000 teachers down in the rural area. First off, I really appreciate the fact that this commission is formed and is approaching its job in such a nonpartisan way that demographics and geography seem to be the driving factors. Coming from a rural area, our needs and our views and ideas are often quite different than what you find in the urban areas. In looking at the maps and drawing those maps, we would just ask for two considerations. The first consideration when looking at drawing boundaries, that the rural areas be left as intact as possible. If lines are drawn in such a way that urban areas are brought into those rural areas, what little voice sometimes we have often gets lost in the urban voice. As it is with the state legislature and with the state school board and other things, sometimes it's difficult for us to get our voices out and across. Particularly in talking about the state school board, we'd just like to also ask that when drawing those boundaries that we don't divide up school districts. There's that 5% leeway that you have with the school boards that can be used. So if it's a choice between getting a more equal representation by number or a choice of maintaining school districts, not dividing them between representation, it would be in the best interest of education to maintain those school board positions to where they represent whole districts instead of part districts. And again, I'd really like to thank you for your efforts and particularly the approach this commission's taking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see if we have any other comments from the public here.
and I'm a resident of Provo City. I just wanted to thank the commission members for all the hours that you're putting into this and the outreach you're doing throughout the state. This once every 10 years, so I appreciate all the time and dedication that you've shown throughout the process and for the opportunity to be able to speak to you. I agree with some of the other comments that have been made about just neighborhoods in Provo and how those are kind of micro communities and make a lot of sense to keep those together. I think one thing I've noticed is that in Provo are two state Senate districts kind of divide the city up in a strange way that hasn't ever really made sense to me. I know there's probably no perfect map out there due to the many constraints that are placed upon you, but I think considering that Provo is one of the largest cities in the state, I think it represents a significant community of interest, and a lot of those areas, there's a lot of interrelation as far as like how issues affect different parts of the city. So I just wanted to share that specifically about how the state Senate districts are divided. And yeah, I think there's also some interesting results that have come out of the updated census data. And so I hope that you're looking at some of those trends as they impact just the different ways that minorities have, the population of minorities has increased in the state, and some of the order of the biggest cities has shifted around. And I think there's a lot of important data, and so that into consideration.
Thank you. Other comments? Not hearing any. Do my colleagues on the commission have any questions that you'd like to either pose to each other or to our audience? Please, Commissioner Hill.
Just a comment. I really appreciate the comments regarding the communities, the neighborhoods within Provo, and your input is I guess validating what work we've been doing as we've looked at this area, as we've been drawing maps. We've really tried to focus on those neighborhoods, considering them as communities of interest. And so we've been using that to inform our map making. So I appreciate your words tonight and appreciate you being here and giving us that input. Thank you.
Please, Commissioner Hill.
Thank you. It's been interesting. I probably spent over 20 days going over maps, and I think I'm pretty familiar with the topography of the state of Utah. Now, let me talk about Utah County. The thing that's been kind of difficult for me as I've worked in the House districts. House district is indicated it has to be 43,000 something, and although we have a deviation we talk about, the way the apportionment is done under the Utah Constitution, it's done by the legislature. So all we do is make a recommendation to the legislature that they have to accept or reject. They've taken a very narrow thing on the numbers because you can count people. And when you talk about community of interest, it's not uncommon to go to a place and have two neighbors stand up and have a totally different view of what community of interest is. And so one of the real challenges I've found in working in Utah County on House districts is your cities have such strange boundaries. And no lie, when you say, I want to put all of, well, you can't Lehigh, and one is bigger than 42,000. Linden, for example. How do I put that? Or Provo, you have a three streets up there. So it becomes really kind of difficult. And then the other thing, they're so close together. Vineyard's really a good example because we tried to put something together. Vineyard's been small enough that it can give us some flexibility. But when we take Orem and Provo, they're big enough that they take up most of the area. Now, that's why it's so important when we put these maps out, you look at it. I can tell you Logan, that's where I grew up, Cache Valley. I can tell you northern Utah, but I have no idea when I'm doing a map of Orem
and I find out that this district has 2,000 too many people, what 2,000 districts are going to move out to get it to the proper size in numbers? And so it's really important you look at them and say, well, you should have done this or that because of this interest, but hopefully you speak as a unit, because the next person may say, no, that's a bad idea. You need to make the changes over here. So as we try to do those. So that's what I found about Utah County and trying to do these smaller districts. Another thing I found about Utah County, in one of our drafting, we started in Utah County. And we really ran into problems because the districts it's like a jigsaw puzzle, it has to fit. You can't get your districts all put together, and, oh my gosh, we've got 2,000 people out in Uinta. What are we gonna do with them? We can't, because when you get to the state boundaries, for example, when you get to Daggett County, you can only go south and west. You can't go north or east. But when you get in these big areas, you can do that kind of thing. So that becomes really difficult. But we found success in putting in maps, the borders, and then filling in as we can and trying to keep that. I know Commissioner Thorne and I have spent a lot of time doing this, and we really try to keep cities whole. Now, let me go to the other area, the school districts. We try to do school districts per county. We've done, I think, a pretty good job in our proposal, except Utah County. You have 3 school districts, Alpine, Nebo, and Provo. None of those 3 met our 218,000 level. So what do we do with Provo? Do we put it with Nebo, or part of it with Nebo and part of it with Alpine? And then we end up, we've got more in there than we can have for 3. So what do we do with the other ones? Now you heard the rural say, don't give them to us. We want to keep our own area. We don't want to be tied up with you because you'll overwin. But numbers count. And so when we start putting counties together, and you have a county like Daggett County with 900 people, Rich County has about 1,800 people, and they want their own senator. They want their own representative. They just can't do that. So it becomes, as we crunch in here together, we know it's not going to be perfect. We know that there's going to people look at it and say, no, you didn't, but we're trying really the best we can. We cannot look at political figures, nor can we look at racial figures. So when somebody comes up to me and says, I'm a Democrat and I need to have a congressional district. So why don't you, I said, whoa, that's called gerrymandering. You can't do that. A Republican came to me and said the same. No, can't look at that. So that's one of the big disadvantages. I think we can't look at that. And we have an expert who's looked at this thing on the racial issue. After we do our maps, then we look at the racial issue. And they come back and they say, you haven't been fair to this minority here or there. And then we try to adjust that to make up for that, but not in our initial drafting. And the other thing that you raised, I wish we could anticipate what the census is right now. We don't know. Vineyard may be twice as large as it was set in when they did the census. But if we start playing that game, we go crazy. We never can get it final. So you just have to say, wait until 10 years and they do it again. Then we'll try to give you help, because there's some areas that are losing population and do that. The last thing I'd say as you start, one of the issues we have is, do we do three big urban areas, say take Ogden and Davis County, Salt Lake, and Utah County, and have 3 districts, and then make the 4th one everybody else. And I say, you go to Grouse Creek, if you even know where that is. It's on the very northwest corner of the state of Utah town, and you drive to Manila, and then you drive down to Blanding, and then you drive over to Vallejo, there by St. George, and then you drive back up there. You can't do that today. And so there's going to have to be some rural and some urban put together, or you're going to have a rural district that is impossible. It's just too large. So I think we try to do that, try to measure that out. We need you to look at the maps and come back and say, not just say, well, I don't like that map. For example, some people say Salt Lake should be 1 district. Well, Salt Lake has 1.1 million. They can't be 1 district. They've got to be split either one. This map, one map I looked at it had it split 4 ways. they go really upset that they want no more than 2. And so as you look at those districts and how they're divided up, I have a philosophy, and I think I've learned it, is that we're kind of all in this together. When Geneva Steel went down a few years ago, income in the state of Utah dropped significantly, and the whole public education system lost money. So it didn't matter whether your kids were in Daggett County, in Manila, or in Ogden, or in St. George. When Geneva went down, the whole state suffered. So I think we have a kind of a compatibility. If Salt Lake City's not doing well, the state's impacted. If Hill Air Force Base closes, it's not going to just be Ogden or Davis County. It's going to be the whole state of Utah. When the mining or the oil and gas production is doing well out in the basin, a lot of money is flowing in to fund education, UVU, the things here in the valley are being funded by that oil and gas production coming out of that area. We're all in this kind of together. So I think community of interests are important, that we understand who our neighbors are and try to help them. I think we're trying to do that. But on the other hand, I don't think we've become so narrow-minded as we say, you can only vote and only protect your area. I would dare say, I don't know where your lines are drawn in Provo, but I would dare say if you have 2 senators here in the state of Provo, I don't think if you called him or her and said, I have a problem, they'd say, no, where do you live? Oh, you live in the wrong part of Provo. I'm not going to take care of you. I don't think legislators think and work that way. And so I think we need to get this done in a way that I think you feel comfortable with, but there's some things we really can't do. And one is political. We can't go into racial things, but we just try to count numbers, and that's the easiest thing to do. So when you look at our map and say, aha, you're gerrymandering, go listen to the 20 days that Commissioner Thorne and I worked together, and you'll not hear one time we ever said, oh, we got to do this because that'll help the Republican, that'll help the Democrat. We don't even know that information.
Thank you, Commissioner Killier. Please, Commissioner Bishop.
Let me thank you for a couple of things. First of all, for giving us the Provo map neighborhoods. That's extremely helpful. I don't know quite how that lines up with the census boundaries, but that's still helpful to try and.
Very few areas where the census block actually overlaps at a teeny bit, but mostly it works.
So these are the kinds of things that are helpful. I also have a great deal of empathy when you're talking about what's happening in Vineyard. Look, let's face it, we deal with the numbers of how they existed in April of 2020. There is not a community in Utah where those numbers are valid. And some areas have high growth, the number is more invalid than other areas. And there's nothing we can do about that. That's just the reality of what happens. Now, ironically, if we were playing politics with this, if you can actually try and make judgments of where you see growth happening, or where you see a high number of kids who don't vote happening, you can play with that. But we are specifically not playing with any of those kinds of considerations, simply numbers. And I just let me tell you how this is so frustrating, at least to me. In the year 2000, we were up for a 4th congressional seat, and we lost it to North Carolina by a grand total of 800 citizens. At the same time, there were 14,000 Mormon missionaries from the state of Utah who are out, and the Census Bureau does not allow us to count missionaries to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as anything. So that missionary for 10 years doesn't count as a citizen anywhere at all. It's a blank. Those are frustrations we have as well, which means the numbers, they're arbitrary. And we get that, and we hope will work with us to realize it's arbitrary, and if there's a great deal of growth that happens very quickly, tough. You gotta wait 10 years to fix it. That's just the way the game is played. But I appreciate you presenting that to us. I think if indeed we have to see where Vineyard or Linden are going to go, with whom they're going to be associated in the future, that's something that we can take into consideration, but it can't be a decision. It can't motivate a decision of ours, but I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything else? Open it up one last time. Any final public comment?
Sorry, just a quick question. My name is Chad, I'm from Union City as well. And looking at the maps, we're grateful that you guys have kept our city all intact. But there's just one area where there's like 25 houses of the city that are not in Vineyard, that they're in the city of Vineyard, but they're not in the house district maps. So I don't know who to talk to about that, but we think it'd be best if all of Vineyard was together around the next 25 houses, be part of the Moore district.
Now, do you know which map that is specifically?
It's the draft house district map. I just scanned it on here. Yeah,
It's the one that pulls up there. Okay.
correct. Yeah, there's 25 houses in a subdivision. It's half of one street that is included in this.
But those 25 houses are within the city limits.
They are in Vineyard City.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll move 3 and keep 25.
So, thank you for all the work you guys are doing.
Thank you. And I will note that occasionally what happens is if this, we have to go by the census block definitions. And occasionally, if there's an annexation, sometimes they'll split into those blocks. And if something like that happens, then it may be more difficult to deal with it. But I think as Commissioner Bishop said, we're quite amenable to trying to catch those kinds of things. And that kind of specificity is very helpful to us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing, no other public comments? I don't want to cut anybody off. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion. Are there any final comments from any of the commissioners? Okay, not hearing any. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, this meeting is hereby adjourned.